Inside the Birds is back. What's up, everybody? It's Jeff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, and of course, Greg Cosell with us again as we continue our NFC East preview series here on Inside the Birds. Our last podcast, we detailed the Dallas Cowboys, one of the most, hated rivals of the Philadelphia Eagles. And on this pod, Greg will take us through the Washington Commanders. First time we'll be calling them all season the Commanders, as that is their new name. And again, Greg, as we talked about last pod, a lot of teams with a lot of changes. Certainly Washington has made a ton of changes, including one at quarterback that we will get into. So let's start just by a quick kind of analysis of Washington. They had a very strange year last year. They started off very poorly. They lost Ryan Fitzpatrick early, so they turned over to their backup quarterback, Tyler Heineke. And their defense which a lot of us thought was going to be very good last year from start, got off to a bad start, and then it seemed to get better as the year went on. So what was your kind of overall look at why Washington was what it was last year?
Yeah, I think the defense was really kind of the surprising thing, because we thought coming off the previous year that their defense would be relatively dominant, to some extent, and obviously Chase Young got hurt relatively early. Montez Sweat did not play a ton of snaps throughout the season. So they really, at the defensive end position, they didn't really have what they were hoping for. And I think at their core, they don't really want to be a high percentage blitz team, and they really couldn't rush the quarterback, I think, the way they wanted to. I don't think they quite got the level of play they had hoped from the rookie linebacker, Jamin Davis, who obviously they hope will be better as a second-year player, but he struggled just with, what he was seeing. We talk about processing with a quarterback. I think he didn't process. He didn't key and diagnose as well as he needs to be a starting stacked backer in the NFL. And then they also had injuries at corner. So they had a lot of injuries on defense that I think really impacted, what they could do defensively. And then when they had to play Taylor Heineke, when you're going to play Taylor Heineke, then you're going to need your run game to be consistent on a week-to-week basis. And their run game was not consistent on a week-to-week basis. So, a lot of things did not fall into place for the way I think they had hoped. And it turned out to be, an up and down year.
So, Greg, we know now Carson Wentz is on yet another team. He is going to be their starting quarterback at Heineke. You mentioned be the backup Sam Howell's on that team, who theoretically would be a third quarterback. But let's get started with Carson Wentz, Greg. You've been on record on our show saying that despite all the negativity around him, he played fairly well. What did you like about him last season?
Well, you have to let's understand a few things first. Number one about Wentz, and number one, what happened last year. Contrary to what people might believe, because people thought that Indianapolis had a great O-line, they did not have a very good O-line last year. So Wentz played behind a poor O-line. Wentz, to me, and I've always felt this way, and Adam, you and I have had this conversation through the years, I think Carson Wentz at his core, in his DNA, is a quarterback that wants to drive the ball down the field. He's got a big play mentality. That's the way he wants to play. For those who remember the 2017 season in Philadelphia, there were a lot more downfield throws. He is not built to run a short passing game. He is not a compact body type. He's not a compact thrower. That's not who he is. So he is now in a situation with a Scott Turner, who is essentially an offshoot of his dad, Norv Turner, where there's a lot more intermediate and downfield throws within the context of the offense. So I'm not going to sit here and say what Carson Wentz will or won't do in 2022. None of us know that. But I think the style of offense fits who Carson Wentz is mentally and physically far more than what would be considered more of a West Coast offense, because Scott Turner, through his dad Norv, they're really descendants of the old Don Coryell offense, which is much more of an intermediate and vertical stretch offense than sort of the methodology of the West Coast offense, which is things that happen quicker where the quarterback has to be much more compact, both in his body type and in his throwing delivery, which is not who Carson Wentz is.
Do you think that the way that the Colts also leaned on the run and would run heavily because that's what they're good at, and they have a great running back, did that maybe take Carson out of a rhythm that he could maybe have established more if he was throwing the ball a little bit more earlier? Or was he not ready for that coming off his terrible year from the year before?
That is hard for me to answer because that you'd have to be in Carson Wentz's brain to know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
He had some big moments last year, Wentz. He had some really big games, threw the ball well. Did not really have those plays that many associate with Carson Wentz. Had only one or two last year.
Mm-hmm.
He played pretty sound football. The problem is everybody remembers the last game of the season when he did not play well. And by the way, the entire team did not play well. So that's what people remember. But, I spoke to a coach who, watched every one of his games last year, and basically, as did I, by the way, and said he had a pretty solid year. Now, there's certain things he doesn't do well, and everybody knows that. Carson Wentz is very aggressive with his mindset. He's not a check down player. That's just not who he is. But I'll tell you one thing that he is good at, and they're going to do this in Washington this year. He's very good in the RPO game, and they're going to do that. And by the way, I know we're going to get to a lot of things here. But sometimes, I just jump around because that's the way my brain works.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if Brian Robinson ends up being a really significant part of their run game this year.
Hey, everyone, we all know that there's a lot in common between excelling at sports and excelling in the bedroom or wherever you and your partner like to be intimate. But if you don't have the confidence to be at your best, it can affect your performance, whether that's on the field or behind closed doors. That's why BlueChew.com is coming to the rescue. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in a chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets help men combat all forms of ED. And because Blue Chew is an online prescription service, you don't have to worry about those awkward trips to the doctor or uncomfortable pickup lines at your local pharmacy. Blue Chew ships right to your doorstep in a discreet package. So just go to BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive prescription within days. That's the best part. This whole thing is done online. It's convenience you can't beat. Blue Chew's licensed medical providers will work with you to find the right ingredient and strength you need for your prescription. This is such a great alternative for those who hate taking pills. Blue Chew's tablets are chewable, easy, and made in the USA, which makes preparation and direct shipping very convenient. If you want a special offer, we got one for you. Try Blue Chew free by using the promo code ITB at checkout. You only pay the $5 shipping charge. That's BlueChew.com, promo code ITB, all one word, to get your first month free. Guys, get your confidence back so you too can perform again like a star athlete. Okay.
Might as well go right to
that.
Let's
go to that, because Gibson was a guy who struggled to stay healthy last year, but he's playing through a lot of injuries. Antonio Gibson. Adam and I thought he was going to be a top 3 to 5 running back, sort of from a fantasy purposes, but just also because we thought he had that kind of talent. What did you see in Gibson's tape?
Yeah, I'm not sure Gibson is that guy. And look, I thought, and I know Adam has connections in Memphis, and I don't, but I really thought Gibson, when he came out, to me, was a slot receiver. And obviously Washington made him their feature back. So that's what they thought. And, they're with him every day. But I think Gibson is kind of a straight line downhill runner who runs hard, has speed. I don't think he's really a natural runner in the backfield. That's the way I see him. Right. And that's why I personally believe that when all's said and done, you're going to see Brian Robinson be their feature back. Now, that might not happen week 1, but I think that's going to happen.
What do you like about Robinson?
Oh, I really like Brian Robinson's tape a lot. I watched every one of his runs from 2020, which was only about 100, and then a ton of his tape from last year. And I think that he's physical, he's competitive, he's determined, he's urgent, he runs with velocity, he runs with power, he can stop and start, he gains hard yards. I wouldn't call him truly shifty and elusive, but he's not stiff. Um, I think you'd probably say he's a little more linear, than elusive. But like I said, he did show some lateral quickness. He did show the ability to re-accelerate, which I think is a really important trait for a back. I think he has feature back size and traits. I felt that it wouldn't have surprised me at all if teams had him as the first or second back on their board. I really like Brian Robinson's tape.
Yeah, the knock on Gibson was, from what I understand, is the lack of instincts to play the running back position because he was a receiver, as you were talking about. And I don't know if you could get that. That's the one thing that I don't know if it's coachable. You could show it to a guy, but he's got to get it mentally. He's got to.
Yeah. Again, because I'm not a coach, I don't want to sit here and say that it is or isn't. My sense is, if you are talking about having a feel and instincts, I'm not sure that's coachable. Gotcha. Can a guy maybe get a little better just because of reps? Maybe, but I don't know if you can really teach a guy to be an instinctive player if he's not. And I just don't think Gibson, he's big, he's powerful, and he can run fast, but I just don't know if he has a true feel as a runner.
The crazy thing, he was one of the most used running backs last year, even
I know.
With those injuries. I mean, he touched the ball quite a bit.
Well, they want to run the ball. Well, when they had to go to Heineke, they wanted to run the ball. And I still think they'll want to run the ball, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
That's built into the way Scott Turner sees offense.
Yeah, by the way, he finished sixth, Gibson, in yards, and he was even higher, I believe, in carries. He was fourth.
But he did not have a high yards per carry average.
No, he did not. Right. It was only about 4.0, which was not anywhere near the top of the, but they ran him. So that's what Ron Rivera does. And then you're talking about the Scott Turner. It seems like a good pairing of a guy who likes to run, which Ron Rivera does, but then air it out offensively. I mean, if you look at when Carson Wentz was really successful with the Eagles, they had a great running game and they had a great vertical game. So you look at
that's what they ultimately want to have. Right. They want to have, they want to have a run game with a play action pass game that has deeper drops. And again, when I say this is not every play. Obviously, I don't want people to think that every pass play is going to be, a deep drop and throw the ball down the field. Of course it's not. But I think ultimately that's what they'd like their offense to look like. Run the ball, and then have the play action pass game where they attack the intermediate areas and the vertical areas, have the vertical stretch element, have vertical high lows as opposed to short high lows. That's what they'd ultimately like to do. That's why Terry McLaurin's back signed. That's why they drafted Jahan Dotson, who, by the way, I can tell you for a fact they liked more than Chris Olave, who I did too, by the way. I like Jahan Dotson significantly more than I like Chris Olave's tape. So, I think that's what they're ultimately hoping to do.
So, Greg, you mentioned Dotson, who's their first round pick. They extended McLaurin's contract. Now, from what I understand, McLaurin is really comfortable as an X. Despite the lack of size, he likes to sort of line up in the same areas. So how do you think Dotson will be used going forward there with Washington?
Well, I think Dotson can line up anywhere. Dotson lined up in the slot and outside at Penn State. He's location versatile. The thing that stood out to me about Dotson, besides the obvious, which is the fact that there's an explosive element to his game, is how fearless and competitive he was working the middle of the field for a guy that's 184 pounds. So I really like Dotson's tape a lot. In speaking to people, they've been really, really impressed with his work ethic, his approach, his professionalism through the offseason. So I would expect Jahan Dotson's going to start for them.
All right, Greg, a couple more questions on these weapons and then the offensive line. But first, we've got to tell everybody about our partners, Freestone Farms CBD. It's our favorite CBD brand because they farm it themselves with all organic inputs, and they offer you education on what they grow and how they grow it to make the best quality products on the market. Look, we've tried a lot of different brands, but honestly, Freestone Farms CBD, it's been amazing for us. We like it after workouts to help with that regular post-workout feel. And critical right before bed, as we've all been sleeping better at night because of it. And what's more exciting is our friends at Freestone Farms just unveiled an all-new strain menu with some supremely good CBD at prices you will love. You just got to go to freestonefarmscbd.com and you will find it all there. Trust us, this menu is something that you've got to check out. They've got strains like the insane tropical tasting Bayox, clocks in at a chart-topping 24.1%. And then there's the Super CBD. It's a half Hindu Kush at 21%. The genetics these guys use just don't get any better. They also grow all of their premium hemp flower in the Garden State with all organic inputs and IPM, nothing synthetic from farm to jar. After harvest, they carefully preserve all the plant compounds with a perfect 3-month cure. Just one look or one smell, it's enough to know that it's CBD done right. And it's a product that's great for anyone looking to take a natural approach to what you put in your body. On top of that, if you use the code ITB, you'll get 20% off checkout. That's promo code ITB at checkout on freestonefarmscbd.com. All right. So, Greg, I want to ask you, as we were talking about Jahan Dotson, and of course, Terry McLaurin just got the extension. This feels to me like a pretty decent set of weapons for Carson Wentz when you talked about the running backs that we did. And is there still room in your mind for Curtis Samuel to come and make some kind of an impact? And how would you see him making it after kind of an injury-plagued last year?
I don't think we know that, Jeff. I mean, I'm being honest. I don't think they know that, and I don't think we know that.
Right.
Because he didn't play. I think that they feel that with McLaurin and Dotson, the other guy that they do know more about and they feel can take a step forward this year is Dyami Brown. So, Samuel, I think, is a little bit of an unknown right now. So we'll see how that plays out. Like I said, I just don't know the answer to that. When a guy, in a sense, doesn't play for a whole year, I think there's question marks. So I just don't know exactly what he is right now. And to be honest with you, I don't think they know what he is right now.
Yeah, he probably will mostly play the slot. But Greg, when we go back to Carolina, I know they did some gadget stuff with you. Did you see him? Did you see him?
Yeah, he played in the backfield at Carolina too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he did a lot of different things because at Ohio State, he was kind of a multi-positional player, and he carried the ball. He was a receiver. So, I mean, I think they'd love to be in that situation where he's healthy and can present a lot of different looks to a defense with where he can line up. But I think they're uncertain of that as we speak right now.
But the group of four, though, with a healthy Samuel now for the first time in a year, and Brown, who you mentioned, with McLaurin and Dotson, Greg, that to me looks like a pretty good group potentially.
Without question. And an interesting guy. And again, I don't know why my mind started thinking about fantasy, but this guy's not going to be a big fantasy guy. But a guy who's always been kind of a quarterback's best friend type receiver, who they have is Alex Erickson. He's an odd kind of guy. He's probably in kind of the Cole Beasley mold, although he's never put up numbers like that. But he's a very intriguing player as a slot receiver. And depending how Samuel plays out, how Brown plays out, the one thing about a guy like Alex Erickson is what you're going to get. And I think that's going to be a training camp situation that's worth keeping an eye on.
It's funny. I thought you were going to say Cam Sims there instead of Erickson, just because he's had some moments against the Eagles where he's been Heineke's best friend, but he's also still there and he's made some plays throughout his career. He's not bad.
Yeah, and he's a big kid. Cam Sims is a big kid.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of big kids, obviously the tight end Logan Thomas, right? I believe he was hurt. He only played 6 games last year, but the year before, he tore his ACL. He's coming off that, but the year before he had a pretty breakout year. So you add him into this mix, and it looks like I would say Carson probably has a better set of overall weapons now, at least theoretically on paper, than maybe even last year that he did with the Colts.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here, and I think the kid to keep an eye on is Cole Turner, the 5th round pick out of Nevada. because he's got a vertical element to his game. And as we spoke, Carson Wentz likes that vertical element. Turner's about 6'5", 6'6", probably not refined yet. But again, he's not going to play 60 snaps a game, but he does have vertical seam ability. And I think they'll find a place for him, depending on specific plays, packages. But because John Bates is not that guy. John Bates is one of those sort of solid, blocking, short receiving tight ends, whereas Cole Turner has a vertical element to his game.
Sure.
One thing I'll add to that, at the Senior Bowl, he's 6'6.5". He stands out because he's long and he's not wide. He's just really tall.
Yeah.
He is a vertical, as you said, Greg. That's the one thing those coaches did with him. I forget which side coached him, but I just remember, even in the rain, you could see this kid could move. That gives you the vertical element. Man, I'll tell you what, this is a pretty nice, pretty interesting and diverse pass target group that they have.
Without question.
I think the biggest concern that you would have with this offense, and especially with the quarterback's ability to function within it, is can he be protected? And is this offensive line, Greg, a good enough offensive line to match what they have there in the playmaking department? Tell me first with the tackles. Leno, who had come over, I think, from the Bears, right? They released him and Washington pounced on him. And then their rookie last year was Sam Cosmi out of Texas. They played him at right tackle. What did you see from these guys last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Cosmi has a chance to be a really solid right tackle. He needed to get stronger because Cosmi was kind of long, athletic. He wasn't, he had almost like a thin build. So he needs to get stronger, which could well happen, of course. Leno, I think, is a serviceable left tackle. They didn't have one, so they needed one, and that's the way it works. I think they'd ideally like to be better at the position, but that won't happen this year. So it'll be Cosmi and Leno. I think inside is going to be really interesting because from speaking to some people in Jacksonville, they felt Andrew Norwell kind of wasn't the player he was in Carolina. Trey Turner has not been the player he was, back 4 years ago. So I think their guard position, even though they have two veterans who, if you look just on a depth chart, you might say, oh, they're really good at guard because there's two veterans who've had success in the league. I don't think either one plays at the level that probably people think about. So I think the interior of their O-line is a question mark.
It doesn't look like they did a whole lot to address it either in the offseason. I mean, this is what they're going forward with Chase Roulier as their center. And I look at their backups, Charles Sadiq, Tyler. Schweitzer has been with Atlanta. I don't see someone who I think can really sort of challenge if there's a slip up there between
that's their question mark on offense right now.
That's a big one.
It's a big question mark. Yeah.
Trey Turner was one of the best guards in football 4 years ago, and I mean the Steelers didn't want him. The Chargers they moved on after him. So did Carolina. I'll tell you what, if you're a team that's got a good front and you could get inside, you could beat these guys. This is certainly a matchup that you feel like you got to win.
I would say that's very fair, Adam.
All right, the Washington defense, which was supposed to be a really strong point for them from the start to finish last year, and it was not. You mentioned Chase Young earlier, how he got hurt, but Greg, I don't know how much you had a chance to see him. I know the buzz out of Washington was that he just wasn't even playing very well before he got hurt. Is that something you saw as well, and anything that stood out on tape to you that when you did watch him before he got hurt?
I don't think he was playing as well as he did as a rookie. But he's a highly talented kid. I would expect coming off the injury and, being healthy this year that you'll see Chase Young what he is. I mean, I'm sure he was humbled a bit, not only with the fact that he didn't play quite as well, but that he got hurt. So, I mean, I wouldn't view that position as a weakness by any means. I think their front's really strong. Mm-hmm. If everybody could stay healthy, because I think, they've got Payne, they've got Allen. They drafted another Alabama tackle in the second round who I really liked on tape. Yeah, I really like Fedarian Mathis a lot. They even signed the kid from Buffalo who can play inside and outside, Effie Obata, who's actually a pretty interesting player. He's got length, he's got movement, he's multi-positional. Their front should be very, very good, assuming health.
Greg, let's go to
go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
I was just going to say, Jamin Davis is a guy I know you liked leading up to last year's draft. Very
did.
intriguing. We know the Eagles liked him, but they were not going to take him in the first round. So let's take a look at his potential. What kind of player did you think he could be, and then what did he look like last year?
Yeah, I thought he could be a 3-down linebacker with length, athleticism, movement. He could play the pass extremely well. But I thought last year he went through what a lot of rookies go through at the linebacker position when they're stacked, is he didn't see things particularly well. Therefore, he was slow to react. Key in diagnosis, the term we always use. I don't think he did that particularly well. I think he got a little better as the season progressed, but he didn't play as much, I think, as they probably would have liked because he was struggling. So let's assume he's better. You're talking about a 6'3", 235-pound kid who is a 3-down backer. So you want him to be that guy. And whether he becomes that remains to be seen. So, we'll see how that goes. But I think when you just look at the traits, you feel like you've got something there. And I think they probably still feel that way. He's just got to play that way.
Who's when we just to go back to the front four again, because it's so talented. All of them are first round picks, Payne, Allen, Montez Sweat, Chase Young. What do you remember about the way they started off last year, that they just were not effective? I mean, with that kind of a front, you should be a damn good defense. I get the back end matters too, but.
And I don't remember specifically, Jeff. So I mean, it's
okay.
A hard question for me to answer, but they just weren't as good, obviously. But
did they change schematically throughout the year, Greg? Did Del Rio go from, the way that the Eagles went from heavily zone to heavily man? Did they have to make some schematic changes?
They actually did make a major schematic change. It started with Tampa, and I believe, and I'm trying to remember, they went from either, I'm trying to remember right now. They went from either heavy zone to heavy man or reverse, and I could look that up, but they made a major change when they played the Bucks, which I think was about week 10.
Right. I think it was zone to man.
I can find that out.
I don't, but I think it was week 6 or 7. But I believe
when did they play Tampa? I'm going to find that out right now.
I'll tell you in a sec. I got it right up here.
Yeah, tell me.
They played Tampa in week. It was right after their bye, week 10. Yeah.
Yep. There you go. It was week 10.
Mm-hmm.
Man, but they played much better after that. Holy smokes. They won 7 of their last 8. Wow.
Well, and remember the 4 straight losses they had at the end there were they were a COVID-ridden team. They were starting Shaka Toney at one point, and I think he's now 8th or 9th on their depth chart.
They won 4 in a row. Yeah, that after the bye, they did win 4 in a row. Yes.
Yeah, right. And they changed. I'm going to tell you that in a sec. Give me a sec here.
You would think with such a dominant front four that they would have started off playing zone, feeling like they were going to get a natural 4-man rush, and then maybe probably had to mix it up when they lost Chase Young and play a little more man.
The word I had heard, though, was a little bit too much freelancing, a little bit. They call hero ball's a little strong, but they weren't playing so much within the scheme.
Right.
And then as Greg mentioned, maybe that after the bye in week 9 and week 10, at home, and boy, they dominated Tampa.
They dominated Tampa.
Really impressive.
They did. Yeah, and then they really, for the next 4 weeks, they only give up 19 points to Tampa. They give up 21 to Carolina, then 15 to Seattle and 15 to the Raiders. So they really kind of found their groove there until the calendar turned to December and they started to lose bodies left and right from COVID. But yeah, but in general, like Jack Del Rio, is he more of a zone defender when he as a coordinator? His tendencies?
I would say probably. I mean, if you look at their whole season, okay. So if you look at their whole season, they were down closer to the bottom of the league in terms of playing cover 1. Right. They played an awful lot of zone, far more zone than they played man throughout the course of the season. So, I think ultimately that's what they'd like. Although the issue they face is this. The issue they face is William Jackson. William Jackson is a man defender and a not very good zone player, because William Jackson does not play well with his eyes. He does not have great zone discipline. He is a man-to-man defender. So we'll see what they're going to do, because, you know, he was a big signing for them and he's still there, and he is a man defender, not a zone defender.
Interesting, Adam. Don't you remember? I feel like we had that conversation a lot here about Ronald Darby, about him being a better when he was up on somebody using his hands than when he was back and would get beat by he would get baited by the slants and then the sluggos, because he had sort of almost too much room or too much time to think instead of just being right up on the wide receivers.
Yeah, and the guaranteed money after the season is gone in his contract. So on Greg's point, and he's actually signed through 23 anyway, the last 2 years void. But yeah, gosh, if he doesn't play well, it wouldn't surprise anyone if they moved on, because his cap number is over 15 million.
Right.
And it's, you know, when Greg says he's really just a good man corner, not struggles against zone, that's, you know, it becomes hard to justify carrying a guy with that kind of cap number.
And keep in mind, they didn't really make any changes on the defensive side of the ball. They're going with this group. It's basically the same group they went with a year ago,
Right.
and they've got some really good players. But, you know, they obviously feel that their defense, for whatever reason, due to injury, whatever, did not play to the necessary level, but that the players are good. I mean, they've got pretty good players when you just look. I think Cameron Curl's a really good player, number 31.
Yeah.
You know, and I mentioned this 2 years ago when Landon Collins got hurt and Curl came in. Adam, you'll remember this. I said Curl was a better player than Collins.
Yes.
And he is. And they ended up getting rid of Landon Collins because Curl's better. You know, they're still going to go with the same free safety and Bobby McCain. The second year corner, Benjamin St. Juste from Minnesota, is 6'3", long, lanky. I think he's an outside corner. So, you know, is he going to play opposite Jackson? That's what I think, but we'll see what they do.
That would move Kendall Fuller to nickel, wouldn't it? If they did that? And
yes,
is that more probably at this point of his career is probably where he's better at, I would think.
Probably, yes.
Before we get out of here, though, I want to talk about Mathis, the D tackle, the second rounder. I know you really raved about him before the draft.
I did. I liked him a lot.
How do you think he fits in with his defense here?
Really, really well. I mean, because he's one of those defensive tackles. He's in some ways he's similar to the guys they have. And I think he can develop into a really quality pass rusher, because Adam, didn't they only re-sign one of those guys inside to a big contract?
Yeah, Ioannidis they let walk. He's in Carolina.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Payne and Allen.
Yeah, Allen signed a big deal. Payne is not yet. Yes.
So I don't know what their plan is with Payne. You know, you can't sign everybody, as you know. So maybe depending on Mathis, they could have let Payne walk. But I thought Mathis was the kind of player that the more tape I watched, and of course, I watch a ton of Alabama because they've always got 1,000 guys. You know, the more I liked him. I mean, he lined up. First of all, he lined up in multiple positions. He probably won't do that with Washington because they play pretty straightforward with their defensive front. But he's got size. He's got length. He can be a two-gapper. He can be a one-gap player. He flashed enough pass rush traits, including being very effective in stunt concepts, that you think he could develop into a sub-front player as he gains more experience. He's got super long arms, a giant wingspan. I really liked Fedarian Mathis.
All right, a couple more questions on this defense before we move on. First, I want to thank our friends at Let's Get Checked for sponsoring this next video. Are you struggling at the gym? Are your T levels dropping? Then get checked with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked offers a wide variety of testing options such as vitamin tests, liver tests, cholesterol, and CRP tests. They also have tests for iron, kidney, diabetes, heart, Lyme disease, sexual health, and of course colon cancer screening, and more. Just head to their website, trylgc.com/insidethebirds, to check out their full range of testing. The link is in the description. Let's Get Checked manufactures all sample collection kits at their accredited facility using the world's best accredited labs and a team of physicians that reviews your orders and results, along with nurses available 24/7 to help with treatment options. Let's Get Checked is your one-stop shop for all your testing needs. Hit the link in this video description to find out more. All right, thanks again to Let's Get Checked for sponsoring the video and letting us know about the importance of your health. health obviously big for Washington too. They didn't have great health last year, so they're banking on probably not having the issues that they had last year. But Greg, when you look at the front again, it's so talented. I mean, it's all the pieces are there. Would be a very dominant front seven, especially front
Yep.
four. Which is the guy to you that jumps out as the kind of the catalyst to what makes their front four work? I mean, it could be the two guys inside or one of the guys on the outside there, Young or Sweat. But who's the
Oh.
one that jumps out on tape to you?
That's a tough question. I think Young at his best is really, he's a difficult guy because I think most teams, not every team, but he's the guy that I think you have to worry about with either you formationally lining up a tight end over him, chipping him, doing things that impact how you play offense. See, that's the key. It's not, it's not just a matter of say, oh, let's double team a guy or let's slide to a guy. It's how it impacts your offense, because every team, we're talking about pass rush here. So let's assume we're talking about offenses lining up with 3 wide. Every team wants to get 5 out, all 5 eligible receivers out as primary receivers. That's what all offensive coaches want to do. When you can't do that, that limits your route concepts, Jeff. It changes the way that it changes what you can run from a route concept combination. That's the bottom line.
Sure.
So I think when you have to deal with a pass rusher that you need to chip, you need formationally to deal with them, then that changes what you can do offensively. So to me, Chase Young at his best is a really difficult guy as a pass rusher. But I remember 2 years ago, not so much last year, but I remember 2 years ago, Darren Payne was a dominant inside player. Now, we'll see if, I guess it's Daron Payne, sorry.
Yeah,
Daron Payne. So we'll see if he's back to that this year. But I just remember him having some really impressive pass rushes a couple of years ago.
Well, I'll tell you what, as we discuss this team, both sides of the football, it seems like a team with a lot of upside on offense and defense, particularly receiver, defensive line, but they got a lot of questions, Greg, when you look at this team.
They sure do. I mean, look, in the minds of many, it starts at quarterback. So that's obviously a big question. And I think with the way the defense played a year ago, despite the fact that they have a lot of good individual players and it's essentially the same defense, there'd probably be questions about that as well. But the defense could certainly return to being really, really good. And like I said, don't be surprised if Brian Robinson ends up being the guy in the backfield.
I look at this defense, and this is kind of too simplistic to say, Greg, but I'm going to say it anyway. I know they struggled at times last year for whatever reason, but there's just too much talent on that defense for them to be as bad as they were for the first 5 or 6 weeks. And then, of course, we know what happened to them at the end of the year last year with COVID and their roster. I look at this defense and I think this defense itself, if the offense can just kind of move the chains a little bit and be decent, this defense can be a very dominant upper echelon blue chip NFL defense.
You would think.
Yes.
Yes. And
just based on
obviously
talent. Right.
Yeah. And one guy just to mention, and then we can finish up here, is another guy who's an interesting player on their defense who's, going to get snaps is James Smith-Williams. He actually showed pretty well last year, given that he had to play a ton of snaps.
And he's an edge rusher or
He's
more
a
of a
defensive end. Yeah, he's an edge player. Yeah.
In fact, he all these guys are not available. A lot of guys are not available, including Chase Young, the COVID issue, and he had to play. And look, he was a 7th rounder a couple of years ago. They've developed a lot of players that they just got to play more consistent. And the other thing is, I don't know how much he'll play, but Casey Toohill, former Eagles, on that team.
Oh yeah,
yeah, he played a lot of snaps last year due to injury.
Right. Injury and COVID. Yeah. And there was another name that jumped. Well, I guess just the fact that, as Adam alluded to, if you're so talented on defense that you can't bring back Matt Ioannidis, who was a very good rotational lineman for them, that just shows you the depth that you already have. The other guy I wanted to ask you about, because I knew you liked him, and I wanted to go back to this on offense, is Sam Howell. I mean, obviously he's the 3rd string quarterback. With Carson and Taylor in front of him, but Carson has been hurt quite a bit in his career. But tell me, is this a good landing spot for Sam based on your tape study and what you liked for Sam?
Well, Sam Howell did not have a very good last year in college, and he'll be
Right.
the first to tell you that. Sam Howell is going to face this issue. He's a 6-foot pocket quarterback. And, we know that the history in the NFL of 6-foot pocket quarterbacks is not really strong. So he's going to have to play at a high level in everything he does, mentally, mechanics wise, understanding. He's got a ways to go. Sam Howell's not going to be ready to play this year. They know that. So if anything were to happen to Wentz, or for whatever reason, Taylor Heineke's the one who's going to play. Sam Howell's not going to be ready to play this year. He has an awful lot to learn.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
couple things here. The Washington's got to make a decision on Wentz's contract by middle of March. He's got $9 million that becomes fully guaranteed on his contract of the $26 million that they owe him. So keep an eye on that. And Heineke's on the last year of his 2-year deal. So not saying Howell would be the starter next year, but he could be the last man standing. He's a guy that at least could compete for the backup job if he gets himself together. Greg, I know you talked to a lot of coaches before the draft. It was more negative than positive from the people I spoke with, largely because of what happened last year. But if you go back earlier in his career, it seemed like there's a little bit of upside with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he throws the ball well. He's a physical kid. He's an aggressive kid. I think that he struggles to throw certain kinds of balls. He struggles to throw to his left. He's a little, even though he's strong, he's kind of tight in his lower half. So he struggles to open up and throw to his left. There's just a lot of work to do with Sam Howell. Because he made plays with his legs and because he's physical and aggressive and competitive, there's also a lot to like. But he's not going to be a runaround quarterback in the league, even though he can make those kinds of plays, but he's a good thrower, but not a great thrower.
All right, please check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com, enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation. We'll pause real quick for a word from our other great sponsors, including our friends at Sky Motor Cars. And if you hop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You'll get a great deal. All right, Greg, Washington, this is the second of 2 so far NFC East teams we've done. The first one was Dallas. When you look at this Washington 53, better than Dallas, worse than Dallas, same as Dallas? I know I'm asking you to do a projection, but what do you think? Can Washington be a much better team than it was last year with this, what they have?
Well, I think the questions with them go to the offensive line. We've talked about Wentz, so we don't need to say that, that he's a question. Obviously, it's always a quarterback thing with any team, but I think the offensive line is a big question right now. And then defense, like you said, Jeff, they've got a lot of really good players. So the question is health, and the question is not just individual players, but can they become a unit? That's the bottom line. I mean, you just look down the list of the players they have, and I'm not sure they can survive injuries on defense, which is what happened last year, because they do not have a lot of depth at a lot of positions.
Agree. All right. Is it the best? We asked you this about Dallas. We asked you last podcast, does Dallas have the best 53 in the division? You said no. So it's a nice little.
Washington have the best 53.
Does Washington have the
division?
best 53 in your eyes?
No.
Oh, process of elimination tells us that one of our next 2 podcasts, either the Eagles or the Giants, have the best 53. I think our listeners are smart enough to start to figure out what direction we're going in.
Not the Giants? Come on.
I do think I think I picked Washington last year to win the division because I believe so much in their defense and what they were going to do with Antonio Gibson. But obviously, a lot of unforeseen factors got in the way. I do think that this can be a competitive playoff team if everything goes right. I mean, I think we all agree on that. They can be, or do you guys not see that at all?
Well, everything. My issue is the interior of their offensive line, which we outlined a little bit ago. That does concern
Big question
me.
Mark. Yes,
and as you said, if their defense plays up to its potential, but Chase Young's coming off a serious knee injury.
Yeah,
you can't expect him to be the same in his 3rd year. He was brilliant as a rookie. There's potential here to be like a 9-win-ish team, maybe 10.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of downside with this team based on the underachievement. Some guys have not played up to their potential, and that's not always. They got a lot of those guys, unfortunately. There's a lot of talent there, but a lot of guys have not played consistently enough to that level.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if they're gonna win more than 10 games, that would surprise me. It would mean that they stayed healthy and that Carson played at a really high level to compensate for, their struggles that they're going to probably have on the interior of their offensive line. And they just clicked on offense from day one. That's what I would have to see. All right. Final word, Greg, last thing on Washington. What do you think?
I think we've kind of said it all here, Jeff. I mean,
right, just making sure you
I
have
don't
anything
know if
fresh.
I have anything brilliant to add here.
All right.
You
Well,
know?
that's fine. We can just cut it
Covered
off
it all.
there. You covered it
Yeah.
all. All right. So a big thanks to our producer, Tyler Strasser. Always does a great job. You've been listening to Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles. Leading podcast in what do I always say, Adam? It's the leading podcast in Eagles Intel, right? Okay. Just making sure I remember anymore. Big thanks again to Greg Cosell, who'll be on with us for the next 2 episodes as we do the Giants and the Eagles and finish out the NFC East outlook here. All right. And of course, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.